Abish's help. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Basra, daf Kuf Samech Gimel 163. And we'll start
Yeah,
Kuf Samech Beis and Beis. Uh,
advice.
Lahu. Okay, the
Yeah,
Shalat Kefreit Ashala. Okay, so this is where we're up to. Lahu. So we're learning about a document. Every document that has one line space. Imagine one line space between the where the document ends and where the Adam sign, that's kosher. But if there's two line spaces, if there's two spaces, two line space of empty spaces, and then the Adam sign, the whole document is puzzle. Why is the whole document puzzle? Because on the second to the last line, the
they
Adam
can write into it.
can write anything in there. You can write a forgery. So another clause that's a faparai. So therefore, two lines is no good. If you have one line spacing, we're never going to listen to whatever is written in the last line. We never pay attention to the last line. That's the halacha. So even if you wrote a bad clause, they're not gonna give it any credence. So therefore, it's only if there's two lines, two empty spaces, is there the star?
Attention was being okay.
Yeah. So now the Gemara's question is, the Gemara asks this question. Shnei shitin sha'amru. We said that there has to be two lines, and only then is the document puso. But depends. Every line, we go to Kusamach Gimel Amud Aleph. Every line, you sometimes write a line, and then you leave a blank space, and then you write another line, right? So does that in order to have two lines of puzzle, you have to have one line, a blank space, and then another line.
Yeah,
So the question of the Gemara is, Hein va'aviran, do you mean, we just began, Lewis, and we're just discussing the two lines that puzzle every star. If you have two blank lines and then the Adam sign, we learned yesterday that the document is invalid. So does that mean Ein va'avira, the two lines with the airspace in between the two lines? So in order to invalidate, let's say, a loan document, right? So you have the document, and then you need one line, an empty space, and then the next line. Oidilma, or maybe Hein v'loy avira. It's two lines, but you don't need an empty space in between the two lines. So even then, would it be possible? So it's a whole question of how big those two lines have to be in order to invalidate a document. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak said, it makes sense that Hein va'aviran, that it means that the lines, the two lines, the airspace in between the two lines. Let's say the airspace is another centimeter. So imagine a lined paper, you have two lines, but you have to have a little space between the two lines. If you think that it means that in order to disqualify a document, it's hein v'lo yaviran, the two lines without the airspace. We're going to skip this parentheses. Beloy avira malay chazia. Without airspace, what could you write there?
no,
Because if you're going to have just two lines, if the guy's going to want to put in some clause, he's going to have to make the font a little smaller than the rest of the document. So everybody's going to see that the rest of the document is written in a larger font, and this is written like in small words. So everybody's going to know right away that it's a forgery. So then, of course, he's not incentivized to make a forgery if it's just two lines with no space in between the two lines. Here we see Hein ba'aviram. It's two lines plus a little space in between the two lines. Shmamina, that's the proof that's absolutely correct. Only if you have two lines but a little space in between the two lines, then it disqualifies the document. Now, the question is, this is as crazy as the sound. Okay, how big those are those two lines. You see, when a professional scribe, when a professional cipher writes, he could write in a smaller line than when a regular guy writes. A regular unprofessional needs more space when he writes, whereas a scribe can write in smaller letters. So now
Yeah.
comes along Rab Shapsai, that's his name, Rab Shapsai Oma Mishmei de Chizkiah. He said in the name of Chizkiah Rab Shapsai, Shnei Shitim Sha'amru, the two lines that we said, is Biksav Yedei Edim, has to be the size of the way a unprofessional witness can write. Like Ksav Yedei Soifa, not like the lines, the spacing that a professional can write. Because what are you afraid of? You're afraid of during those two lines, the guy holding the document will, in his own handwriting, start putting in something, a clause that wasn't written there. But he writes only in if there's a lot of space there, where there's enough space for somebody who's unprofessional to write. So maybe it's the line spacing is bigger. But if it's only a small line spacing where only a professional can write in that line, so then you're not afraid that the scribe is going to write in that. No professional scribe is going to write in that line space and ruin his reputation to write something that wasn't there at the time of the document. My timer, what's the reason? The Gemara explains. Kol Hamazayif, anybody who wants to perform a forgery, lav legabe safra ozol mazayif, he's not going to go to a professional scribe and have him do the writing of the forgery. He's going to try to do it himself. The counterfeiter tries to do it himself. He's not going to go to a scribe to do it, and therefore it's going to be a little different. He's going to have a big space, a bigger line space. Okay. Now the Gemara says the kama. Exactly how many line spaces is there, and how many ear spaces is there? Because what will disqualify a document? So the Gemara wants to visualize it. So I brought the picture up on the screen over here because it's important just to see this screen over here. The way it looks is like this. You're going to have, let's say you're writing lech lecha, right? So if you happen to write these two words underneath each other, you're going to have two lines and 4 ear spaces, because you have the ear space on top of the word lech lecha. And then you write lech, and then you have an ear space underneath, where just the leg of the chaf is, and the ear space on top has the top of the lamed. And then you have another ear space in between lines, which will accommodate the top of the lamed of the bottom line, then written handwriting, and then you have the bottom lecha, another ear space. So basically, you have 2 written lines and 4 ear spaces. I'm going to send this out. It's very clear to see. So you have 4 ear spaces. That is the opinion of one opinion in the Gemara. The other opinion is in the Gemara is that when you don't need 4 ear spaces. You need 3 ear spaces. One on top of the lecha, then the air space on the bottom of the first lecha, but not a separate air space for the lamed of the second line, because then you're going to squeeze it in, not directly under the chaf, but off to the side. So you don't need an extra space in that, and then one underneath the chaf. Okay, so that is the second opinion of the Gemara. Now that you can see it on the paper, now you can read it easily in the Gemara. So the Gemara, so the Kama, how big is this line spacing? Again, we're discussing the 2 lines that disqualify a document. If you leave this blank, the document is all disqualified. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar says, Kegoin leich lecha, you write leich lecha on 2 lines, Zel gabezeh, one on top of the other. Alma, so we see from this Sava that Rabbi Yitzchak, who held that lech lecha is one on top of another, it's shnei shiten, va'aboa avirim. You have 2 lines and then 4 ear spaces. That's what really the bottom line is. 2 lines and 4 ear spaces. Rav Chia bar Abba Mishmei de Ulama. Rav Chia says, you're going Mamala the Chaf Milmata. You have the Lamed on top and Chaf Lamata, but they're not directly underneath each other. But Alma Kasava Shnei Shitim Ushloish Avim. He holds that you need 2 lines and 3 air spaces. And finally, Rabbi Bo says, Kagoin Baruch ben Levi ben Shita Achas. You write the word Baruch, the son of Levi, in 1 line. And Kasava Shita Achas Ushni Avirim. You have 1 line and 2 air spaces, 1 on top, 1 on the bottom, but that's it. You don't need an extra air space. So it's just a machlekes on what exactly the 2 lines, how much air spaces in addition to the 2 lines you need. Either 2 air spaces, 3 air spaces, or 4 air spaces. Now the Gemara. Amar Rav. Now comes a new piece of Gemara. Till now we are discussing where the air spaces. I'm going to bring up a picture, and it's this is till now we're discussing here's the picture of a document, right? Now you have the Eid, Yosef ben David Eid, Moshe ben Shlomi David Eid. Till now we're discussing if you leave 2 extra lines between a document, the written document, and with the witness's sign, then it's in. But if they sign right underneath where the document ends, then it's kosher. What happened? Now, underneath every document, you have where Bezdin signs what's called like a handpick, which basically is the court says this was a valid document. They give their kosher approval on it. So how much air space is between the witnesses and where the Bezdin signs on the document? How much airspace would invalidate that? So the Gemara is going to say it doesn't matter. You can have a lot of airspace that disqualifies, that spaces in between where the Edom sign and the Bezdin signs. So the Gemara is going to ask them that. Amar Rav said a shocking statement. Lo shanu, we didn't learn that any spacing can disqualify a document elabeit Edom l'ksav, between the witnesses and where the document ends, the written part of the document, and then where the witnesses end. If you have too much spacing there, the document is invalid. But between the witnesses, let's say the witnesses signed, but now underneath it, you have where the court signed, and that validated the document. Even if there's a lot of empty space there, it is valid. So the Gemara jumps on Rav. What do you mean? If there's a lot of empty space there, you just cut off the top part and just write a whole new star, and then you have like a verification of Bezdin that it's kosher. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishno ben Eidin l'ksav." What's the difference when there's a space between the witnesses and the document itself? You're afraid Dilma Mazayev, because of my deboyev achasima sahade, that a person is, if you have too much space between the witnesses and the document, a guy is going to put in the empty space, he's going to write another clause, and you have the witnesses signed on it. So then that's for that same token, ben edim lasharta, between where the witnesses sign to where the Bezdin signs, nami mizayev, you could also put in you could also put in some clause there, because of man the boya, the chasima sahada, and sign witnesses. In other words, if you can see the picture, if you leave a lot of empty space over here, so then you could cut off the whole top of the star, okay, and then write a new star over here, get 2 people to sign, and you don't even have to verify the signatures of those 2 people, because you have underneath the certification of Bezdin. It's like you have a blank check that's signed. So that opens itself up to fraud. So the Gemara is going to say, like you can see in the picture already, gives the answer of the Gemara, and it says the Gemara that you scribbled lines in between, right over here, right after the Edom sign, and you scribbled a whole bunch of lines, so nobody could put anything there. So that's what makes it kosher. And says the Gemara, you scribbled lines, and that's why if you have even if you have a lot of space, because you scribbled lines, so nobody can write anything there. So that's what makes it kosher. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, if that's the case, ben edim l'shtar namin mitaytle, between the witnesses and the document, if you have an empty space and you fill it up with lines, you could also scribble it in, and that would make it kosher. So why don't we say that? It says the Gemara, Amrei, the yeshiva answered, Sahadi atuti hudi kasimi. So the witnesses will sign on the people are going to say that witnesses signed on there was a document. Basically, they're going to say that the witnesses signed on the scribbled part of the document, and then the guy scribbled it out, and then wrote a whole no document on top of that. So therefore, that's why that invalidates even with a scribble in front of, on top of, where the witnesses sign. So that's what the Gemara says. That's why we disqualify that. So then the Gemara says, so then if you put a scribble, like you can see in the picture, if you put a scribble, why don't we say that that really the Bezdin signed on the scribble and not what's written on top? Maybe they only validated, maybe there was a whole document over here, and that's what they put their stamp of approval, but not what's on top on top. So the Gemara says, Beidino atiyute loy chasime. Bezdin never signs when there's a scribble. So the scribble was put in after the Bezdin sign. But a witnesses, you could tell two guys, and you bring two guys and have a scribble right there, tell two witnesses to sign. Or you could tell two witnesses to sign and then scribble. And then put a whole document on top of that. So there's more of a concern of fraud when you scribble when there's scribbling on top of where the witnesses sign. But when they're scribbling on top of where the Bezdin sign, we know court is more astute and will not sign on where there's a scribble. And therefore, if there happened to be a scribble there, it was added there so that you know that there was the Bezdin's really signing on the real document on top. Now the court says, the Lechesh, let us be concerned. Listen to this. Okay, you have a document that looks like this: scribbling, and then the Bezdin sign, and this is kosher. Let us be concerned. A guy is going to cut this whole thing off, cut the top part, write a whole nother star on over here. The Lechesh, let us be concerned. Dilma guy is Leila Eli. He's going to cut the whole top part, Umachik Leila Tuyuta, and erase what was written in the scribble. The Kosev man the boya umachtim sadek. He's going to write whatever he wants, sign new edim, and so that looks funny because where the Bezdin sign, it looks normal, and then the whole top part is erased, but that's not true. But Amar Rav himself said, "Shtar habahu ve'edim al machak." If the shtar has a document itself and the witness has written what looks like was erased, it's nevertheless kosher. So how could Rav say that you could leave a lot of space between the witnesses and where the Bezdin sign and fill it up with scribbling? Rav would say that if you erase this part with its scribbled, as you can see, and just cut the top part off, write a whole new document, sign two edim, and nobody's going to verify the edim because you have already a Bezdin signed underneath. And Rav said that would be kosher. So we come at base. So Hanicha l'Rav Kahana the Maser le'Mishmei Shmuel Shaper. It would be good according to Rav Kahana, who said that Rav never said it was kosher. Only Shmuel said that if you write on an erased part, a document on an erased part, it's still kosher. El Rav Tavyumi the Maser le'Mishmei Rav, but Rav said that Rav was the one that said that it's a kosher document. How are you going to resolve this problem? Rav said that you could have Bezdin sign right underneath a scribble. And Rav also said that if Bezdin is signed underneath where it was erased and clearly it was erased, the document was erased, and you have Edim sign, it's still a kosher document. Well, that definitely opens up any document that has that method to fraud. And says Kisava, Rav holds Kikolki High Gavna, when you have an erased part of a document, you can clearly see it was erased, then you ain Mekaiman Oisim in Ashar Tishboy. We're not going to say that it's a kosher document just by looking at the signature. Element of Edim Shmoy. You're going to have to re-get it validated by somebody saying testimony that these are kosher witnesses that signed. But you're not going to say, oh, it's automatically kosher. I guess you're going to have to get a new stamp or have the witnesses say, oh, we signed on this document. Because we're not going to validate just because there's underneath it a stamp of Bezdin. So bottom line that we learned so far is this opinion of Rav. Rav said, and this is important, that you have a document that ended with witnesses, and then you have underneath it a bunch of scribbles, even if the scribbles take up 7 lines, and then you have the court signed on it, it's a valid document. That's what Rav said. Comes along the Gemara, another opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo shanol beinim tzav. We only invalidated, the only time we validated, and this is validated, if there's one line between the witnesses and the document. If there's just one line between where the witnesses sign and the document, that's okay. Aval bein eidim lasharta, between where the witnesses are signed and then the stamp or the signing of the court, even if there's one extra space in between, one line space, puzzle that invalidates the whole document. In other words, the Bezdin has to mamish sign right underneath where the witnesses sign. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishana ben Eidim lasharta." Why are you more concerned by the asharta, by the validation of Bezdin, than the line that's right underneath with the Eidim sign? And so why are you concerned? Dilma gayas li'iloi because of who the Eidah b'shita achas. Maybe if there's one line space between where the Eidim sign and where the Bezdin sign, a guy's just going to cut the whole top of the document off. And then you have a one line space with a stamp of approval from Bezdin. So in that one line, you can write a little document, a text, and have Eidim sign on one line. And Yochanan holds star haba hu ve'edav. If you have a document that the document and the witnesses all appear on bashita achas on one line, kosher. It's a kosher document. So therefore, if you have any extra space between where the Eidim sign and where the Bezdin puts their signature, if you even have just one line, it opens it up to fraud. You just cut the whole top part off. So now you have one space, and then you have where the Eidim sign, with the Bezdin sign, and in that one line, you're going to write a document, let's say a text, and have 2 Eidim sign on one line. Rabbi Yochanan holds, in that case, it's kosher. So the Gemara asks the question, Eidim l'ksav nami. So then if you have between where the witnesses sign and where the text ends, if you have one line, it should also be invalid. Maybe you're going to cut off the whole top part, and then you're going to just write one line of text, and then you have to weigh them underneath. So is not going to open itself up to fraud? So why do we validate a document that has even one line space between where the Eidim sign and the document? You can just cut the top part off and just write a one-liner, like we've learned all this whole time. Even if you write a one-line document, if Eidim are underneath that, invalidate the line. You see, we never pay attention to the last line unless the Eidim are signing on that last line. So if there's a clause and Eidim are signing on the same line as the clause, then we validate such a document. But here, Kesavar, Rabbi Yochanan holds star habahu b'shita achas. If you have a star just written on one line, the Eidah b'shita acheres, and the witnesses are underneath it, that's a pasala document. That would be an invalid document. So it doesn't open itself up to fraud if you have a one-line space between where the witnesses sign and where the document ends. Asks the Gemara one last question. The Leichash, let us be concerned. Dilma kasaf hu ve'eda b'shita achas. Let's say a guy, if you have a one-line space between where the witnesses sign and where the document ends. So let's say you cut off the whole top of the document. Then he's going to write one line of document, one line clause, plus he'll get 2 false same line, and then you have the 2 witnesses underneath. So maybe that will be a problem. And then they're going to ask him, so then why are there four witnesses on this little tiny document? You have one line, two people signing on that same line, and then two people underneath. He'll say, I wanted to make it above and beyond. So I got four people to sign, two on one line and two underneath. So why don't we concern ourselves with that? Because Rabbi Yochanan will hold, Kol ki hai gavna, ein mekaymin oisem in edim shalamata, el me'edim shalamala. If such a case, we're going to ignore the bottom two, and we're going to try to validate with those two witnesses that are written on top, that same line. And if those are fraudulent links, fake IDs, then we're going to disqualify the whole document. So that doesn't open itself up to fraud because you're going to still have to validate it. So this is where it ends. So just to review the three main points. The three main points is between the document and where the witnesses sign, if there's two line spacings with airspace, then the document is invalid. If there's just one line of airspace, then the document is kosher. But where the Bezdin signs, there's two opinions. Rav says that you can have a lot of space in between, like you as you can see in the picture, as long as you have it scribbled in, and then with the Bezdin signs, it will be a valid document. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, nothing doing. Even if you have just one airspace, that would invalidate the document because Rabbi Yochanan holds you'll just write a whole new document, a whole clause with two edim on that one line, and then you have a Bezdin underneath it, and that opens itself up to fraud. Okay, that's what ends Daf Kuf Samach Gimel.
Shikoya, Hayit Nach.
Abbas and again.
Hayit Nach.